The defenders of the dead live in the past while they destroy the future. They face a revolt of the young, a band of rebels led by two teenagers, Sarasi and Nield. 13-year-old Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn are not supposed to take sides in any war. But once Obi-Wan meets Sarasi and Nield, he feels he must join their fight, even though Qui-Gon forbids it. The rebellion has become personal, and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are on opposing sides. Welcome to Padawan Library. My name is Tim May, and I was completely unembarrassed to be reading this week's book in a doctor's waiting room less than 4 days ago. I'm here with my co-host, Levi Paratic.
Hello,
and
younglings.
We have a guest today. Why don't you introduce her?
All right.
Hi-ho, Kermit the Frog here. Thanks for having me on your podcast, guys.
Oh, hi, Kermit.
It's going to be a great show.
Well, we all love Kermit here. What's your...
Okay, gotta go.
What's Kermit's puppeteer's name?
Well,
hi, Steve
puppeteer
Windmere. How you doing?
is... hang on. She dropped the phone. Cut this part.
So.
All right.
Hang on.
All right.
Why don't we introduce...
Oh, God, actually. Oh my god, you guys, you'll never guess who I saw leaving the studio as I came in.
Who?
It was Kermit the Frog.
Wow. Well, he was just in here.
Oh,
He was talking.
man, that's
wow.
nuts. I missed him.
It's hard
oh
to do
God.
these
Okay,
bits with
so
2,000 miles
I did not,
between us, I have to say.
I didn't... So, the person you are hearing who just entered the studio is Mel Lyon, who is my wife.
She is my wife.
And she has completely orchestrated this whole Kermit the Frog thing by herself. I was not warned about this at all.
But everyone was blown away by the impression.
I have to say, it's better than your attempts at humor that we have in the middle part of the episodes. So maybe you should have her write those sketches next time.
Yeah, I probably should.
All right. So today, later in the episode, our main topic will be the 5th Jedi Apprentice book, Defenders of the Dead. And we'll have a lot to talk about there. But for this first segment, you guys went to Disney World a couple weeks ago. You cut together a little travel log video that you guys can find on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Padawan Library. And so we just wanted to talk, and obviously Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is opening in May of this year. And
correct.
So you guys weren't, and that's actually in California, but in Florida it's opening in the fall. So you guys didn't get to experience that, but you experienced some Star Wars fun, and we wanted to talk a little bit about that stuff. And if you guys want to see what we're talking about, you can go over to the YouTube page and watch the video.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, maybe watch that first before we.
No, we riff on it first. Keep that. Then they won't tune back into the show.
You can just pause it. There's such a thing as a pause button, Levi.
That's true.
It's
that
fine.
is true.
All
right. So
we want our YouTube
anyway.
numbers good. We want our podcast numbers good. Let's be focused here.
So, for the couple of you who are listening, we went to Disney because her sister was actually on her honeymoon there, and we were in the Florida area, and we wanted to visit. So I wanted to capture basically all of the Star Wars things that you could do there before Galaxy's Edge, of course, turns the whole thing on its head. So in the video, you will see two stage shows. The one is the March of the First Order, where every hour on the hour at Hollywood Studios, Captain Phasma and about 8 stormtroopers will march down Sunset Boulevard and then put on a demonstration of might, I guess.
Which you would assume would be like backflips or cool shit, but it's really not.
Stormtroopers don't do that.
But it would be cool if they did, is all I'm saying. That's what I was expecting.
Mel, I think you're contradicting yourself from the video, where you are clearly audible saying, Phasma rules!
Phasma does rule! Yeah, for sure. Like, she's hard as hell in that stage show, whatever.
You constantly, like, contradict yourself because you boo when she mentions General Hux.
I know, well, you know, she's cool, but, like, the fact that, you know, she's also this, like, military leader is kind of not cool.
So it's like you think that saying like Sarah Huckabee Sanders is cool even though she represents Donald Trump.
No, there is nothing cool about any of that
it's fine,
going on.
Oh, that was the best reference. So anyway, they put on their demonstration of might. And then they march.
No backflips, no breakdancing.
And they walk right back down the street.
Kind of being in like exact formation, I guess.
Yeah, and then like actually marching, and you kind of are impressed that like, oh, there's actually people in those suits, and this isn't the movie. However, the one thing we've been debating, and there's no way of knowing, is there actually a woman in the Phasma suit, or is it just a guy? Like, there's no way to know.
I assume that audio is coming through a sound system, because you wouldn't be able to
Yeah, it definitely is. So, like, I mean, I'm sure they can find a tall woman to do that role, but it's like, no one would ever know, so you could definitely get away with a dude.
Well, in the same vein, then, like, all the stormtroopers could be women, too. You'd never know that, either.
Exactly. So after that, in the video, you'll see... we went outside the Chinese theater where the great movie ride was, and there's some classic Star Wars legends out there who've left their handprints in the cement.
All right, this part of the video, I just have to say I want to remind everybody watching the video that this is Levi and Mel.
This is very Levi.
Yep.
Go on. That's fine.
Okay, so we see some great celebrity hands and footprints.
Which, like, by the way, too, like, there were some cool, like, not Star Wars related people that, like, would have actually been at, like, the real Chinese theater, but, like, you look at the dates of the one there, they're all in, like, the late 80s and 90s, so I thought that was pretty funny.
I was kind of surprised there were only I guess 4, because R2 and 3PO, but there were only the 4 Star Wars related ones. Seemed surprising.
I was surprised Carrie wasn't there either.
Right.
Like the fact
she
that
was definitely at a few Disney events and stuff, like when Star Wars.
Right, the fact that they got Harrison Ford there was surprising to begin with, but like the fact that she wasn't there, unless I just didn't see her handprints there.
Because there were a lot, and they were all kind of like spread out too. Yeah. Like it was pretty big.
And then one thing I do want to note, as somebody who's actually been to the real Chinese theater, the Disney Chinese theater is way nicer than the actual Chinese theater. And at the real Chinese theater, you would never dream about sticking your hands in the handprints, that those are Los Angeles city streets and you have no idea what is down there. But since it's Disney, it feels way cleaner.
I don't know about that. Haven't you seen the very subversive, very cool movie Escape from Tomorrow? You don't know what happens.
Oh my god, I hate that
You don't know
movie.
what happens at Disney World, man.
Oh my god, that movie was so bad.
To be fair, though, it was a pretty, like, dead space at, like, the studios. there were like not a lot of people like hanging around there. It was kind of shaded, so it was like I feel like people were there.
That's
just
true
for that
too.
reason.
And like right now, this is the awkward spot where they've taken out the Great Movie Ride and they are putting in Mickey Mouse's first ride. Mickey Mouse has never had his own ride dedicated.
I'm very excited about this. I think it's disgraceful that it's taken this long. R.I.P. to the Great Movie Ride. But
right.
Oh man.
Well, what I was afraid to was, like, are they going to get rid of the Chinese theater aesthetic? And I don't think they are. I think this is just, from what I can gather, this ride is going to be, you enter the Chinese theater because you're going to see a Mickey Mouse cartoon. And
He's
you
a
are
classic
basically
character of cinema. Come on now.
Right, and you enter into a Mickey Mouse cartoon. That's kind of the gist that I'm getting from this, and that sounds really kind of exciting to me. So, R.I.P. to the Great Movie Ride. There's some... Pour one out for the Great Movie Ride. There's some great stuff there. But this sounds like a very exciting ride. So past that, there is a live stage show called A Galaxy Far, Far Away, where it was described as reenactments from scenes, from the classic scenes from the movies. So I was expecting lightsaber battles, and
backflips
and character interactions, and what it was a very awkward, very rambling Yoda narration, which was clearly Tom Kane, and which it was just basically nonsense speak, and then a character would come out, and half the time it was just dialogue ripped straight from the movies. And they would just walk around and wave at the crowd. The only character who I noticed actually had new dialogue recorded for him was Boba Fett. Boba Fett was the only character who had actual dialogue, which was recorded by the guy who does the Clone Trooper voices in Clone Wars.
So not Tamura.
Yes. So, yes.
Okay.
So, but, it's close. It's
no, that guy's good. I love Clone Wars.
Yeah, it's at least somewhat related to that. Clone Wars update. I just finished Season 2, and I thought it was really silly how at the end of Season 2, like, there was a run of episodes that just all ripped off movies. So there's, like, a Seven Samurai episode, a Godzilla episode, a Lassie episode with R2-D2 that I thought was really silly. So, the end of Season 2 kind of ends in a thud. Anyway.
Well, it's a hit or miss show, but there's some incredible stuff.
Season 3 so far, we're two episodes in. It has been like, I've cried each episode.
Yeah, do you remember the Clone 99?
Oh, yeah, that's an amazing episode.
Yeah,
amazing.
Oh, my God. Absolutely I'm glad you guys are enjoying Clone Wars.
I do. Well, this is something you won't see in the video. Leading up to this event, there's only 3 characters that you can have a meet and greet with. However, on my Instagram, a sponsored ad kept popping up for the Disney Cruise Line where they had like a Star Wars night aboard, and they show all of the characters that you can like meet, and they're like R2-D2, Darth Vader, Stormtrooper, Boba Fett, and then they show Sabine from Rebels and Ahsoka. So I was really hoping that I could meet Ahsoka in the park. Well,
Ahsoka is one of my probably 2 to 3 favorite Star Wars characters that is not.
She's incredible.
Yeah,
in the movies.
The best.
She is incredible. And you will love her even more. Just keep watching.
I know.
She is just the greatest character.
So I was a little disappointed that there was no Ahsoka in the parks that you could meet. And we left the studios. We went to the Magic Kingdom. On another side note, leaving the studios, we walked past JWoww of Jersey Shore fame, which made my day. I could not believe that. She was on the phone pushing her kid in a stroller. It was not like an interaction at all, but it was just cool to see somebody from the TV.
From the TV, she stepped out of the TV.
Yeah.
Oh no!
So we were at a Starbucks in Magic Kingdom, and this girl who was probably about 10 or 11 walked in, and she had on a homemade Ahsoka costume.
It was
that's
the
cool.
greatest thing I saw that day.
Yeah,
That's
and it was just like the whole top head part was like made of duct tape. It was so cool, and like I wanted to say something to her, but I felt like weird, like approaching a small child.
You definitely felt
And
weird approaching them, but not weird about filming them with Kylo Ren or whoever, or from afar. This is the strangest part of the video to me. Was it Kylo? I can't. Or was it stormtroopers?
Like, their parents could have said something.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
You're fine. I mean, it wasn't
yeah.
that creepy, I guess.
Yeah, but the girl ended up actually approaching me because I had on that Queen Amidala shirt, and she was like, I love your shirt. And I was just like, I love your costume. And for whatever reason, I was beaming after that because I was just like, that was so cool. I actually got
the
to
closest
see
you'll ever come to feeling the love of a father.
Basically.
I apologize. So you guys then you looked at some props in this video, and I actually have a bone to pick with you about your the time you spent on certain props versus others.
Okay.
Can I just let me get this out?
Yeah, go right ahead. I want to hear this.
All right, so you guys, I'm sure there were a lot more solo props. I'm putting that out there. I know, I get it. It's the most recent movie. But the fact that you guys spend so much time with the solo props, and then you're like, oh, it's Anakin's pod racer, and it's a speeder bike from Return of the Jedi, whatever. What the hell? I don't care about whatever that Lando device was. I don't even remember what it was called. That you spent like, oh my god, I can't believe it. And then our viewers don't care about that device either. You were looking at a speeder bike from Return of the Jedi, and it was just a glance. A glance.
I don't think it was like authentic though. Like it was definitely one of those bikes that like they had in the parks before, just like for photo ops.
Yeah.
Like it didn't look like it was actually from the film.
It's like because there's nothing on it.
Lame.
There's nothing on it that says that they're actual movie props. With the pod racer, like I should have spent more time videoing it, but there was like it looked authentic because of the way that the seat was worn and all of the switches were there. It didn't seem like it was like some fake thing that they set in there. However, Disney does have a history where they had a photo op where you could sit on a speeder bike and get your photo taken, and this thing was outside for years, and they just removed it rather recently because of Galaxy's Edge has caused somewhat of a disruption to the area. They've had to do a lot of like remodeling. So it's like with the speeder bike, there's no sign on it that says this is from Return of the Jedi. So it's just like, I'm taking it with a grain of salt because it's just like no one would ever know.
Well, I know you guys think Solo is a better film than Return of the Jedi. That's what this means. We all know. And we can move on.
Okay, so we did a character meet and greet with the legend Kylo Ren, the canon Kylo Ren.
No.
And it was a very awkward interaction because he speaks and I could not understand half of the things he was saying to me. So I just stood there awkwardly. And what's interesting is some characters in Disney, they have, I guess they're called performers, and then they have, not critters, but like fur characters.
Furries, yeah.
I don't think they call them
Ren's
furries these days.
furry.
They might have at one point.
No, Kylo Ren's
so
for
like
sure
if you see if you see like Little John from Robin Hood, which we did see awkwardly there, it was just like Robin Hood, wow. Like it's just like you meet him on the street, it's a guy dressed in a suit, and he, you get a photo op, somebody standing there to take your camera, they take your photo. Well, with these character experiences that we had with the Star Wars characters, they make it so that like you're interacting with the characters, like with Kylo Ren, he speaks to you, so it's like for kids it's like you feel like you're actually meeting the person. Well, for me it was just like I'm standing there as Kylo Ren is circling me. I have an issue with eye contact, and I would look at him in the face, and then it's just like, whoa, this guy is like super close to me, and I'm looking at this eyeless mask that's just, evil looking.
His head also looks so much bigger than his body.
Yeah.
The proportions are off.
Yeah, they are, and it's like a plastic mask too. You could tell it's not like metal or anything. And it's not like the woman who is taking any photos there was like, oh, pose, smile. Like, she was just snapping photos like random fire the entire time. So
that's a job you need to get, Levi.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
If
you listen into the video, you can hear us interacting with the girl who is like. She just like
the line controller,
yeah,
I guess.
And they keep everything in character. And one of the things I wanted to do was get my Padawan library notebook signed by Kylo Ren. And so I asked her, does he do autographs? And she goes, no, because of confidentiality reasons. He's not allowed to sign things. But she noticed that my notebook was Solo related, and she goes, oh, the Solo text or something like that. Yeah. So they try their best to like keep this like an in-universe experience, which is what they're trying to do with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Whether or not
we are going to talk about Galaxy's Edge, whether we go or not. We're going to talk about the first reports. And hopefully at some point both of us can go either together or separately, and we can do an episode. But that'll probably be 500 years from now. But
I agree.
But still, that was the last part of the video, right? And you guys took there's a very funny bit in the video where you're laughing up a storm at old Kylo Ren, our boy Kilo.
It was silly.
No,
I'm sure it was.
Now
there is. You were talking about me filming those kids. I want to talk about that real quick because something very, very funny happens there. So there's 3 kids. I'm assuming they are siblings, and they are interacting with 2 First Order stormtroopers. And the stormtrooper goes like, I need to see your identification card. And the oldest boy pushes the stormtrooper, not once, but twice. And the stormtrooper then motions to him, so the 3 boys are standing there side by side. He motions to the boy to walk away. The boy then walks over to his mother, and then the stormtrooper poses for a photo with the 2 kids. So like, the stormtrooper actually punishes this kid by not allowing him to be in the photo op, which I thought was very funny.
See, that kid doesn't deserve it. Don't touch the talent. We learned this.
No, stand up to the authority.
Yeah, okay, but let's also, they're in character, whatever, but that's an actual person that's making minimum wage. Underneath
that. It's an actual, and that was like an actual 6-year-old kid. I don't think that.
Oh, whatever. That 6-year-old. He looked older than 6 to me, but that's.
Yeah, same. I agree with it.
I don't know. Like 7 then. Or
he was at least 8.
I wouldn't have pushed. Wow. I wouldn't have pushed someone at Old Sturbridge Village or Colonial Williamsburg when I was 7 years old. Just because I'm like, you probably own slaves. Screw you.
You should have.
Get out of here,
yeah, but they're an actor. It's an actor. I still was able to tell the difference between reality and fiction. All right.
But, that's the whole, experience.
See, this is my problem with the experience. I don't want to go too far down this road because we do need to review the book at some point. But I will say the whole experiential thing, I think, is fraught with concerns. Fraught!
Yeah, probably.
But we'll see how it goes. I hope it's great. I'm sure it'll be awesome for the people that spend $500,000 on the hotel room or whatever.
Yes, right.
All right, so did you guys overall... I hope you enjoyed your trip to Disney World. It wasn't just these kind of tepid Star Wars experiences. I hope you guys did some other fun stuff that was more...
Yes, we did.
Okay, cool. But if you guys didn't pause earlier, make sure you check out that video. We need to get our views up. You can listen to the show on YouTube. We have them on YouTube, but we're also going to try to get some video content. We need all kinds of content, viral content. All right.
Yes, we also have our tie-dye experience that correlates with.
Oh yeah, of course.
Episode 3, the hidden past.
So you can check that out if you. We weren't talking about that in episode 3. I don't think we mentioned that. So make sure you guys go back and check out that tie-dye iron-on video. So anyway, when we come back, we will be discussing the 5th book in the Jedi Apprentice series, a very eventful book, Defenders of the Dead.
Extremely.
Defenders of the Dead. Join us.
Dead.
Hey guys, Tim here. Normally you'd be hearing a hilarious comedy bit written by either me or Levi in this part of the show. And this week it was supposed to be me, but I have a lot of stuff to do. We've argued about this on the show before, you might remember. I am in graduate school and I'm working, and I got sick this week, so this has been a rough time. You can't enjoy my incredible comedy writing this week, and I'm sorry. And I figured instead of making Levi force himself to do another one, I just leave you this message, and next week I hope we can make you laugh again. Welcome back to Padawan Library. I'm Tim May, here with Levi Peretic and Mel Lyon. This week, we are discussing Defenders of the Dead, the 5th book in the Jedi Apprentice series, by, once again, of course, Jude Watson, the goddess of all things. And so, before we get started on talking about the book, I wanted to ask you, Mel, you're a guest on this episode, and you're going to be a guest next week, because this is a 2-part book. And we'll talk about that more later. But I was going to start by asking you, Mel, about this series, because you're joining us for the first time this week, and you'll be coming back probably many times. You have been reading along with the podcast. What do you think about? What's your experience with Star Wars books? And what do you think about Jedi Apprentice so far?
I really wish that, I had actually read these books or, been around these books, as a child, because I feel like this is just such a great series. And it does not need to be as good as it is for, children's books. But, oh, shit, now I'm fucking this up. Okay. So, I got into Star Wars, a little bit later than you guys did. I was in about, the end of 4th grade before I even, watched A New Hope. So, that's what, around, 8 or 9 or 10?
Something like that.
Yeah, and, it was always really hard for me to find, Star Wars books. Because, our library didn't have, a huge amount of them, and then I feel like in school libraries, too, there's always, that one random one.
Oh, yeah, mine it was Mission to Mount Yoda.
For me it was,
my elementary school library had just Glove of Darth Vader, 3 copies of it.
Wow.
3 different styles. There was one that was hardbound, there was one that was, library bound, because some kid had ripped the cover. Classic.
Classic. He was like, this book sucks.
Yeah, I had a hardback Mission to Mount Yoda at my library, and I remember it was the thinnest book. It was even thinner than the paperback is.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, there was a Jedi Quest book, because that's the one with Anakin, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm never gonna read that. But then there was a Galaxy of Fear book. I think it was the first one. So I did read that as a kid. I remember, this summer that, after I discovered Star Wars, I read, there were, 4 of the, what did we say? It was the Junior Jedi Knights?
Something like that.
Yeah,
we
Junior
had,
Jedi Knights, the young readers spin off to the young adult series.
Yes.
Young Jedi Knights.
Yes, exactly. So I read, the first 4 books of that in, a weekend or something ridiculous. And then there was something else I was just thinking about. I read the Young Jedi Knights. I read, the first 2 books of that because I, I'd randomly found them at, a paperback book place. But these books, they seemed, very hard for me to find at the time.
Well,
And I guess that was just before I, like, knew how to use eBay, I guess.
this specific, our specific area of expertise for this podcast, these books weren't, I don't think they were generally in print that long. They just kind of came out every month or two. There was a new one, and so I think that's probably a big part of it. You're,
Yeah.
like, I'm sure if, like, because when I was a kid, I was mostly reading the adult Star Wars novels, quote unquote adult novels. They were perfectly readable for a 7-year-old. But those have remained in print basically in perpetuity. Very few of them, if any of them, have really gone out of print. But these ones are impossible to find. I'm talking to people that I tell about the podcast, and they're like, I don't know, where would I find those books? You can find them.
Yeah.
They're not expensive. They printed a ton of them, but they were out of the regular bookstores very quickly. So
Yeah. Something else I did notice recently online is I stumbled upon an Asian web shop because I was searching for Jedi Apprentice stuff, trying to find images and stuff to post on the social media, and I stumbled upon a reissue of The Rising Force under the Legends header.
Huh.
So it seems that they may have re-released the first book. I couldn't find any of the other ones. It's like they took the cover and roughly drew over it to make it kind of look more cartoony. But yeah, it is under that Legends banner. But it apparently seems to be, it said it was in Malaysia. So I don't know if that's stateside or not.
I do hope they reprint these. Maybe they could just do them in omnibuses where they put 5 of them in one book or something, or
I agree.
3
Yeah,
or
that
something
would be
in
good.
one. But because I think it's easily some of the best Star Wars non-movie Star Wars stuff I've ever read.
Yeah, for sure.
So like that, it stands up right with any of the adult novels or the comics or anything like that. So
This book especially.
This book especially. Let's get into it. So why don't you kick it off?
All right, so first thing you'll notice in this book has a tonal shift. This book is dark, is all I will say, if the title didn't tell you that, since they're defending the dead. So this is Chapter 1, following the Jedi's success on Gala. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn are dispatched to a planet called Melita Dan, and this is a planet, or Dawn. I don't know how you've been
I was
pronouncing it.
saying Dawn just because it's the 2 A's. It seems
I think that's how you would say it. I think it's just silly because it looks like Dan with an extra A. So this planet has been locked in a civil war for over a century. It's been years, and the reason why this war has been going on for centuries is because the people cannot agree on what to name the planet. The one side believes the planet should be called Melita, the other side of the planet believes the planet should be called Dan, and because of this, they're willing to die for it.
See, I don't know if that's the actual reason.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does it say that?
They talk about how they
are
forgot
very vague
the
about
reason.
it.
The reason that it's called Melita / Dawn is because there's 2 different groups, 2 different peoples. It doesn't seem like they're 2 different races, at least Star Wars races, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But
they're all
the
the same.
Melita and the Dawn, and the Senate basically was like, well, since both of you hate each other so much and you don't want to name the planet, we'll name it Melita / Dawn. But they explicitly talk about how nobody remembers what the initial conflict was. This seems like it's more of a modern conflict whenever they joined the the Galactic Senate.
All right. I did see a note here, at one of my notes here said they've been locked in a civil war for 30 years. That must be over the arguing of the planet name. And then it says but reasons for the war dates back centuries, and the people cannot seem to even remember why they started fighting in the first place. So anyway, Previously to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan arriving, Yoda sent a Jedi Knight by the name of Tal there, and she was known for her great diplomatic skills, and she had come very close to negotiating peace when war broke out again, and she was captured and severely wounded by the Melita. So their mission, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's mission, is to go and rescue Tal, and then return with her to the temple. So once they arrive on the planet, they've borrowed, and this is completely unnecessary to know, but they had a borrowed ship, Queen Vita from the last book, let them borrow a ship, and they fly into the planet, and they get on the ground, and they are supposed to meet with a contact, a man by the name of Wehudi, and Wehudi is supposed to sneak them into the capital city of Zihava, and he'll lead them to Tal. So they get to the perimeter of the city, and they see that, Wehudi is a Melidan, and they see that there are dawn flags raised above the city, so they're worried that the city has been captured by the dawn, and there's also a particle shield around the city. So Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon go in search of they use the Force to find like a break in the particle shield that they're able to slip in, and they see that there is one, and they have to scale a large wall. And Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon says, "I need your rope, your carbon rope from your backpack." So Obi-Wan sets his backpack down, and when he sets his backpack down, it hits some sort of metal disc on the ground, and before he can even say anything, the ground bars come out of the ground. They're like in a little cell, and then the ground opens up, and they fall in.
And so then they find themselves kind of in a cell, and they're looking, and Qui-Gon's like, "I know there's another exit out of here," and they look for another exit. They find one. It's in a similar way with the seat, with whatever the breaks in the walls. Or I found all this a little bit confusing. I'm not going to lie. And so they wind up in this dark, kind of wide open space once they get out of the cell, and they feel disturbances in the Force and all kinds of stuff. And they're looking around, and then a warrior turns up. And shows up, and he has his blaster pointed directly at Obi-Wan.
Yes. So that leads us into Chapter 3. Real quick though, in Chapter 2, I want to mention this now because I'm going to bring it up again later. There's a moment in this chapter where Obi-Wan comments on how he is hungry and wishes he had eaten before they left the Starfighter. It's been mentioned before in the last book, Obi-Wan has a voracious appetite because he is a growing boy. So it is mentioned very briefly in this chapter. So this warrior who's coming at Obi-Wan with a blaster, it's aimed right at his heart. Obi-Wan bursts out his lightsaber, goes to slash the weapon out of the man's hand, and it cuts right through. Turns out it's a hologram, and it's a message from a Melita warrior, and it's about to... this warrior is about to march into the 21st Battle of Zahava, and it's a message to his wife and children, and they telling them how he might not make it back. And then they move about this room and they trigger more holograms. The next one is from the man's wife. She went into the next battle, the 22nd Battle of Zahava, and she was killed. And they realize that this place they're in is a mausoleum, and they even find markers for this guy's children who also died in these various battles. there's a remark here where like Obi-Wan mentions like he's already like seen enough blood like on this planet, and they've only been there for like an hour because of all these different holograms that were left for them. And they also notice that there's like flowers set up, like fresh flowers, so it definitely seems like that people have been there. And there's this one little passage here. Let me see if I didn't mark the page number here. Okay, here it is. At the bottom of page 17, and it leads into page 18. I'll read the Obi-Wan if you want to read the Qui-Gon bit on page 18. You see where I'm at?
Yeah.
Okay. There are so many dead, Obi-Wan observed, but there's no clear reason why they fight. The battle follows battle, each one conducted to avenge the one before. What is the real dispute?
Perhaps they have forgotten it, Qui-Gon said. The hatred is bred in their bones. Now they fight over meters of territory, or to avenge a wrong that happened 100 years before.
So that I just have that marked off. So that this is you really get
that basically sums it up.
Yeah, this sums up what is going on this planet. So that is chapter 3. There was
remember they when they exit the mausoleum, they're on.
Right, yeah.
They're on a ridge, and they take this path, and they're toward the city. But then snipers start shooting at them, and at first they kind of run from the snipers and they hide. But then they wind up hiding behind like this proton energy tank that if it gets shot, it could be an explosion. All kinds of stuff. Pretty cool action scene here. But, eventually they kind of have to engage with the snipers and fight them. And there's this one guy who turns out to actually be Wahudi, the guy they were there to find. Their contact, Yoda's contact. So
yes.
And
so this brings us into chapter 5, which I have given the title "The Lengthy Exposition." So
that's true.
We
can trade off here if you want.
Okay, because this is like the longest chapter like in the book. Also, too, I remember what I was going to say. Why is there a booby-trapped jail cell above their mausoleum? Like that whole part that they fall into the.
We'll get to what I think. I think this was a trap set by perhaps Wahudi. Spoiler for people that didn't read the book in advance.
Okay. So
that's what you get.
So Wahudi claims he didn't know
read
that the
this
Jedi
out of print book. We expect a lot of our listeners.
So Wahudi didn't know that they were coming because the transmission from the temple was garbled, and because what he claims the evil Dawn jammed the transmissions. So this whole area is controlled by the Dawn, and basically Wahudi ventures out this far, and kind of they wait along this edge because they are protecting their hall of evidence, and this is what they call those mausoleums. And
it's a very Scientology sounding phrase, the hall of
it
evidence.
really does. And they're like described as these square black windowless buildings. Like they're like perfectly square is how they're described. And as Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are actually flying in, they see them like rows of them overhead, and they're wondering what they are. So these are where they store their honored memories of their glorious dead. And let me see here. So they visit the halls of the dead. They visit them weekly to honor their ancestors, to hear their stories. Because, like we mentioned before, like every one of these has like a hologram of the person. So I guess like they record like goodbyes before they run off into battle, just in case.
That's not really explained.
Yeah, but they also bring their children there weekly to keep the history of injustice alive. There's the
Dawn. They control the outskirts of Zehava, and Wahudi, he starts leading Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon through that and into Melita territory. And so Obi-Wan notices a couple things here. He notices no middle-aged people. He asks about that, and Wahudi's like, the Dawn wiped them out. Qui-Gon talks about the war wiping that out. He corrects him, no, it was the Dawn. It was the Dawn specifically. Like, they're the only ones to blame. And he also notices some graffiti, very important, that says, "The young will rise. We are everyone." He asks about that, and Wahudi is very dismissive, just like, "Oh, crazy kids. They're trying to like, he talks like, he's just like, "Oh, with all the stress of my life, I got a crazy teenager in my life, too." He's out all hours of the night.
What's the matter with kids these days?
And all of these, so it's like only young people and old people, and like all the old people are like battered. Wahudi has only one arm, and he's like there's not enough of those plastoid arms to go around, so like the medical supplies and their weapons are stretched thin. There's almost no money left on this planet, and these people are just this mangled generation, I guess you'd say. So Wahudi leads them to the Melita HQ, which is like this, what used to be like this big palace, and now it's surrounded by this huge wall. And he claims he's going to take them to Tal. And as they're walking in, he says, "No, this is a weapon-free zone. You Jedi need to leave your lightsabers outside." And so of course, like, Qui-Gon's like, "Well, of course we'll comply." So they set their lightsabers out on a rack, and they're led inside, and as soon as they're inside, the door slam shuts behind them, and Wahudi shouts, "I have returned, comrades. I have brought 2 more Jedi hostages for their cause."
For our grand cause. Grand cause!
Wahudi is a backstabbing bitch.
Well, it's a grand cause, Levi. So,
It is.
Immediately, Qui-Gon is like, I have the Force, right? Retrieves the lightsabers.
This is kind of funny because
this was like very interesting how this
they
was
mention
revealed.
this in Chapter 5 about how, like, as Obi-Wan is walking into the palace, like, Qui-Gon is like adjusting his tunic, and the way they describe this in Chapter 6 is that, like, Qui-Gon set the lightsabers like on the shelf, but then did this like crazy like magician sleight of hand thing by like unfurling his tunic, and when it was like unfurled, he like nabbed the lightsabers and brought them inside with him.
Well, he's the original magician.
The OG.
So, yeah, QG, the QG.
QG.
Kill me.
Yes.
Oh, God, QG. Okay, so he retrieves the lightsabers. He like hits Wahidi in the shoulder. He grazes him, and they start to run. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and they get outside, and they're in this enclosed courtyard, and the wall is rigged with a bunch of thermal detonators that I guess are rigged with some sort of motion sensors. So if they try to climb the wall or jump over the wall, then those thermal detonators will blow. But in this moment, a grate opens on inside the courtyard when a hand comes out and begs them to come, and they follow them down.
So they are basically their rescuer is wearing a hood, and they lead them through these tunnels that look like they've been like crudely like reinforced with wood, and then these tunnels, of course, lead into the sewers where Obi-Wan mentions like how foul it smells, and that like they're up to their knees in sewage water. So this eventually leads out into a large vaulted space, which is an old burial chamber. And we learn that this is the headquarters for the youth, those graffiti spraying ruffians.
No good kids.
Yes, these are children with dirty faces.
These no good nicks don't deserve the great life they've been given by their parents.
Exactly.
Exactly. So we are introduced to Neild, and Neild is the leader of the youth, and then
now,
learn.
let's pause for a minute. I don't comment
Okay.
much on the names in Star Wars. They're always goofy. This one, Neild. Let's make sure our listeners understand what his name is. Not Neil. It is
Neild.
Neild, and it's not spelled
With a D.
like you'd think. Oh, is that spelled like Neil then D? No, it's spelled Nield. Carry on.
Okay, so Neild is the leader of the youth, and then the rescuer, the hooded rescuer, takes off their hood, and we learn that this is Sarassi. I don't. That's how I'm pronouncing it. I don't know how you're pronouncing it. I don't love this name. I think this name is kind of weak. In terms of, because this Sarassi is a character I kind of like, but I don't love her name.
Sarassi is definitely how I was pronouncing it.
Sarassi.
I don't know. I don't have a problem with the name. It's better than Neild.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
At least
I like
I can
how you're
say it
pronouncing
without like stressing a syllable, like the end of it, which is not probably how it would be pronounced in real life. It's okay for them to have names that people have in real life. Luke Skywalker. There are people named Luke.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I agree. Wedge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Wedge, a classic name that we all know. We all know a Wedge. We all know a Wedge.
Yes. So we learned that the young are neither Melita or Don. They are everyone. This is their slogan, that they are everyone, and they want this war to be over. Even though there's apparently like a ceasefire right now between like the Melita and the Dan, they know war will break out at any time. So they mentioned that the elders pour all their money into the Hall of Evidence while the children are starving. And apparently there's not even any land left on the planet to farm because the elders keep building more halls of evidence on the land, and what land is also left has been scorched by war, so they can't even farm. There's no food. This planet is a hellhole. And also, too, with what money they do have, the elders build factories for munitions, and they make the children work there. What hell have we landed in here?
Yeah, this is pretty rough, even from like a literary standpoint, as like a reflection on our own society.
Yes.
There's been child labor in almost every one of these books, which I find interesting.
Well, this book has a very dark tone to it. Like this book, I feel like the other. Well, now this is Dave Wolverton, but we are a long ass way from Jumba and Grulb the Hutt here. Like we have come a long way.
Never diss Grulb in my presence ever again, or I will stop this podcast. Number one. Number two. I do think this book is darker in tone, but there's been kind of a progressive darkness to the books, I would say, from the beginning. The last book, Mark of the Crown, which was, at least, we'll see, it was the high water mark for me so far, the series. That book dealt with some pretty intense stuff, too. And, about some sort of indigenous peoples and all kinds of stuff. All these books have something on their mind, which is what you want from a Star Wars story. Absolutely. That's why... we're prequel fans, because they have something on their mind. So, and these books are a great representation of that era because they care about the real world as well as just the Star Wars universe. So,
right. So there is a section here that I want to read. It's on page 47. And this goes to show a little bit about Neild, the character.
Oh boy!
So
I think I know what you're going to talk about here.
Yeah. So starting here, we have Neild. He's remarking on something about how he's saying that the Melita government was hoping that they could force the Jedi to speak on their behalf of this Senate on Coruscant. And then we have Qui-Gon here. Then he does not know the Jedi, Qui-Gon remarked.
A slender boy spoke up. He doesn't know anything, he said in a joking tone. He's a Melita.
Neild sprang forward like a shot from a blaster rifle. He wrapped 2 hands around the boy's neck and picked him off the floor. The boy's feet flailed as Neild squeezed his throat. The boy's eyes widened in a desperate plea. He let out an anguishing croaking noise, trying to get air into his lungs. Neild squeezed harder. Qui-Gon took a step forward, and at that moment, Neild loosened his grip. The boy fell to the ground, gasping. "No talk like that here," Neild said. "We are everyone, Towan. You sleep for 3 days and drain 2 for that."
I'm going to send you to drain 2, Levi. Get rid of you, host the show by myself.
Neild is very passionate about this
He's
cause.
a loose gun.
He is a loose gun.
You know, he's like, he's, like a guy, punching, Richard Spencer in the face. You're like, cool, but also, it's still a crime.
Yes. So they go on to explain they have this plan. They're willing to help the Jedi find Tal. They know where Tal is, but the Jedi must help in their grand scheme here. And their grand scheme is they are going to convince that the Melita are attacking the Dawn, and that the Dawn are being attacked by the Melita. And in this moment, they're going to basically cause war to break out, and in that time they will be able to ransack either side's weapons storehouse, and they'll take their weapons from them, which will force them not to be able to fight. And it's also this distraction that will allow the Jedi to get to Tal. Obi-Wan is... he sees what is going on with these children, and he's moved by it, and he nearly blurts out, "Of course we'll help you," but he knows better. He waits for Qui-Gon to speak, and Qui-Gon responds with, "We've seen the Melita side of the story. We've seen your side of the story, but as a Jedi, I need to see the Dan side of the story." And Neild goes, "Oh yeah, you want to see the Dan side? Come with me."
All right, so, and Neild claims he says he is Don, so, or that's where he came from. Neild, before I continue with the story, Neild is not my favorite character. We'll talk more about him. I agree. I think the idea of the character is strong, but he comes off. I think he's supposed to be pretty sympathetic through the rest of the book, and his cause is sympathetic, but giving him that scene that we read right at the beginning, that's basically your first impression of him, is probably not the best choice if you want me to really sympathize with him. Not with the cause, because I sympathize with the cause through Sarasi and Obi-Wan, and just because it is a just cause. It proves to be a just cause. But he is... You're like, I mean, you are supposed to have conflicted feelings about him. I'm curious how that develops. Anyway, moving on. Sarasi, she leads them through the tunnels to Don territory, where they can walk freely above ground, because Neild is apparently still cool with some of the Don elders or whatever. Like, they don't know about his connections, which is an interesting thing. I hope that is explored more. But they wind up, they lead them to this once beautiful lake, and Neild talks about his memories of the lake and how it's, been desecrated by this giant floating hall of evidence. It's floating above the lake, this is apparently the only significant body of water for 1,000 miles around, which makes me curious how they're going to have, like, these green fields and stuff that they talk about later in the book. But anyway, so they go in. And, Sarasi talks a little bit about her family and how basically all of them are dead, or brother's dead, or father's dead, etc. They go into the whole...
Well, actually, she has a brother who was sent to a munitions factory, which she hasn't heard from. Yeah, so I'm curious if this comes into play later.
We shall see, but they go into the Hall of Evidence, and Neild activates a ton of the holograms. And, he's talking about how they're, it's a monument to these, dead people, these dead fools. And then one of them, who calls himself McKay, he really sets Neild off, and, you can assume, there's some sort of connection there. That's confirmed a bit later, that it's his father. And he gets really mad about it. I think this is interesting, because Neild, later on, there's another thing with the Halls of Evidence that Neild says, and I think it's interesting that this is the primary concern of his, is the Halls of Evidence, which, goofy name aside, are just memorials for dead people, which is not exactly the thing that I would center my entire rebellion against a pointless war over, you know what I mean? But at least in the middle of it, we can talk about it at the end. If there's a peace, then we can talk about, do we want these monuments to this stupid time in our life? I'm not a Confederate monument guy or anything. But it seems like maybe not the most important thing for him to be talking about, rather than like starving children. I know that they're spending this money on. I don't know. He seems very hung up on the Halls of Evidence specifically, more so than the war itself, to me.
I agree.
He's still a kid, so I guess
that's true. You got to remember
if
these
had that attachment.
Yeah,
right. They're not supposed to be rational people.
That is true. I'm not. This isn't a huge criticism of the book. I'm just curious. So anyway, he again reiterates that he knows where Tal is and that she's injured. And Qui-Gon is nervous because he sees that Obi-Wan is really into the whole thing. He seems very committed already to the cause. And Qui-Gon's like, you should remain more neutral, not just for neutrality's sake, but because we don't actually know the full story. And did you see what that guy did back there? And all that stuff. Yeah. So, Neild and Sarasi's plan is to fake, the Melita and Dawn attacks on each other, distract both sides, and allow the Jedi to rescue Tal in the confusion. And Qui-Gon reluctantly is like, okay, well, I agree. I'll agree to it because that's our main mission, is to rescue Tal. If we can get Tal out of here, then I guess I'll agree to this, even if I'm not totally comfortable.
So, back underground, preparations begin, and Qui-Gon is pacing in a rare show of impatience. He's trying to butt in while Neild and Sarasi are planning, and they reject his help, and he is very disgruntled by this, and he goes to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's just sitting there watching them prepare, and Qui-Gon's like, it's probably not a good idea to fully trust these guys, but I'm gonna go and do some tunnel exploring. You hang out here. So he's just like, I need to be alone. I'm annoyed. So Qui-Gon goes to explore the tunnels, and Obi-Wan stays to watch them build their weapons, and they are building slingshots that shoot laser balls. And if you shoot a person with these laser balls, all it does is sting them. But if you hit a hard object, they sound like blaster fire. And then, so that's part of their plan, is they're going to shoot these at buildings, so either side thinks that blasters are being fired. And then they're building missile tubes, which they are packing with paint and rocks. So finally, Obi-Wan is tired of sitting around, and he wants to go offer help. And he goes and starts up a conversation with Sarasi. And I'm going to actually have Mel read this section with me here at the bottom of page 61. Obi-Wan sat up to begin Hang on, let me start. Obi-Wan sat and began to scrape the knife against the supple wood. What do you think our chances of success are tomorrow?
Excellent, Sarasi said firmly. We're relying on the hatred of the two sectors. All we need to do is create the illusion of battle. Both sides will react without bothering to verify reports of blaster fire and torpedo launches. They expect warfare at any moment.
Your battle may be an illusion, but the danger is not, Obi-Wan pointed out. Both sides will have real weapons to fire.
Sarasi shook her head. I'm not afraid.
Awareness of fear can protect you if it does not overtake you, Obi-Wan replied.
Sarasi snorted. Is that one of your boss master Jedi's sayings?
Obi-Wan flushed. Yes, and I have found it to be true. Awareness of fear is an instinct that warns you to be careful. Anyone going into battle who says they are not afraid is a fool.
Well, call me a fool, Pada Jedi, Sarasi said flatly. I'm not afraid.
Ah, Obi-Wan said lightly. You go into glorious battle without fear, confident that your filthy enemy will collapse. He was repeating the vain boast in the vain boast of the dead in the halls of evidence, and Sarasi knew it. She flushed as Obi-Wan had a moment before.
More Jedi wisdom. It's a wonder you managed to survive this long. If you keep pointing out what foolish things people say, Sarasi said finally with a half smile. Okay, I get your point. I'm no better than my ancestors, marching blindly into a battle I will lose.
I'm not saying you'll lose.
Sarasi paused, fully seeing Obi-Wan for the first time. Well, maybe I'll feel afraid on the day of battle, but today I feel ready. This is the first step towards justice. I can't wait to take it. Do you have any wisdom about that?
No, Obi-Wan admitted. Sarasi was unlike anyone he had ever met before. Justice is something to fight for. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be a Jedi. And we can keep reading here, but
That's a lot.
yeah.
So,
but in this continue,
Pada
go ahead.
Jedi. This I figured was the main reason you wanted to read this was Boss Master and Pada Jedi.
Yes.
These are just fascinating phrases that I will be using and integrating into my everyday life. Please,
Some great disses.
Pada Jedi. I'm going to call any annoying kid, I will call Pada Jedi. Any annoying boss master.
Boss master.
So, there you go. All right, move on.
But this is a very romantic scene for these books.
Do you think that...
Well, I guess it does, it kind of, like, progresses.
How do you feel...
I don't know
there.
Do you think this is like a romance or not?
I don't feel it's a romance.
I think it's, like, a lot of, like, tensions are high, there's a lot of adrenaline. And,
a lot of hormones,
yeah,
maybe.
a lot of, like, 13-year-old hormones going on.
Because in these books, like, as this goes on, like, Obi-Wan definitely has more of a relationship with Sarasi than he does Neild. So I'm sure that will play something into it.
I'm also curious if there was actually any sort of edict about whether or not Obi-Wan or Qui-Gon could be involved in romantic relationships in these books.
Well, the Jedi are forbidden from having attachments.
Of course,
but
in, say, like, Clone Wars, I don't know if you guys have gotten, I think this might be in Season 3, but there's, have you gotten to the character of Satine, the Mandalorian character?
Oh, Satine, Satine is
with
great.
Obi-Wan.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
and
so
I don't
much
think
great
that
there.
anything
definitely,
happens
like, a
in Clone
history
Wars,
there.
but it's implied that during maybe the era when these books take place, something was going on when he visited her the first time. So I wonder, because, like, that's the first time any of the kind of old Republic era Jedi were ever, besides Anakin, were ever given any inkling of a romantic relationship. So I wonder if maybe Lucas or Lucasfilm was just like, let's avoid that because that's going to be, we need to save that really for Anakin, that's like a big taboo he's breaking.
Right.
No.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but there have been like characters that feel like they might be love interests for either Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan that have kind of turned away from that in this series so far.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because in case you guys haven't noticed, we're talking about this book like we don't know how it ends. That's because it ends on a cliffhanger. So we will see these characters, Neil and Sarasi, again. So I'm very curious to see if that develops into anything or if they're just friends. But anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
And just by looking at like cover, just kind of briefing at the other covers in this book, there may be like a Qui-Gon love interest that appears later in these books.
That would make sense.
Like, there's
Qui-Gon
something about
he doesn't give a fuck. Really?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Qui-Gon's kind of an independent
classic
agent.
rule breaker. That's why he's not on the council. Sarasi goes into Neild's past a little bit, and we find out the one hologram that like Neild was like mocking was his father's hologram. Like he was calling his own father a fool. And then we find out that not only did his father die in that battle, but his 3 brothers also died in that battle. And then like 2 days later, his mother was killed in battle. So at age 5, he was sent to live with a cousin who was like only like 16, and she was more of a sister to him. And they moved to Zahiva, where they had 3 years of peace. And then when war broke out again, she was killed. So at age 8, Neild was on the streets on his own, and he took it as his cause to start organizing the youth and the orphans. And he would go to the orphanages and bust the kids out, because that's where like the elders go to find children to work in the factories. So he started to organize the youth, and he'd get them out of the city. So outside of the city, on the outskirts, are whole tribes, I guess you'd say, of children. They have weapons and stolen comlinks, and Neild is in contact with them. So he's got this whole organization of children going on. So let's see here. Where do we go from there? Again, I'm hoping with the amount of exposition in this book, we do not get that in the next book, because so much is explained in these books. Yeah,
I'm sure that first chapter is gonna be like
the whole first chapter will, of course, probably be
very smushed out.
Yeah, we're gonna re-explain everything, but hopefully from there it smooths out. So Sarasi pleads for the Jedi to help, and Obi-Wan says, "I cannot promise you the Jedi support, but I can offer you mine." So right here, Obi-Wan's like, "Yes, I am all in this cause right now."
He's all in on the young, and he doesn't have Qui-Gon's permission. But even with that, he knows he's kind of going out on a limb here, and he could get disciplined for it, but he commits. So, he tells Qui-Gon, "I'm going to sleep in Neild and Sarasi's room," so that he can kind of sneak out early in the morning. And they all go around to these neighborhoods, and they launch the laser balls that you talked about into these neighborhoods, and they scare everyone, both Melita and Don neighborhoods, I should say. And then after that, everybody's kind of a stirring, and they head to a military base, and they strike that, and it rouses the soldiers in the military base, and they run away, and they think they got away. They slide down a pipe back onto the street, and they're just walking, and they're in Don territory, so they think they're safe. They got their fake IDs and everything, and then these soldiers, they come up behind them. They're like, "Hey, show us your IDs." They show them, and they're like, "Okay, what's in your bag?" They say to Sarasi. And Sarasi's like, "Oh, it's just, some bread or some sort of baked
like
goods.
Muffins, right?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Wuja muffins.
Yeah, muffins, So, space muffins. She's got space muffins in her bag. That's what she's saying. And it's early in the morning. She had to get them so they're warm. And she luckily, apparently, has them covering all the, weapons or whatever in her bag. And they're like, "Okay, that makes sense." And they ask what's on their on their belts, and they're like, oh, it's just toys. We're practicing for battle. We're practicing to become the next great warriors in the next battle of Zahava. They're like, hey, the battle of Zahava might be happening right now. And they're like, what's that on Obi-Wan's belt? That doesn't look like a toy. And he just lights up his lightsaber. He's just like, it's a new toy. Like, and they're like, oh, man, we didn't have toys like that. That sucks. And they let them go. So, very fun. Funny scene.
And there's also here, Obi-Wan, towards the end of the chapter, he's referencing the muffins, and he says, and I thought you brought them in case I was hungry.
See, yeah, okay.
Ninja Tweez.
To bring it back to the previous conversation, I think I'm curious. We'll see how it goes, and I think we may get some love interest in the series. But I do think, though, that even if they don't turn out to be love interests, that's how you write like romance when you can't write a romance. So I'm curious about this.
Well, the way I was commenting on that is because this is the second time Obi-Wan has mentioned that he is hungry, and this has been a rather humorless book, and both attempts at, well, I mean, this is funny, but like most of the attempts of humor at this book are food related, and there is one more food related joke in this book. It's actually with Qui-Gon, but it was something that I did notice while reading this book the second time. So you're saying
this is Weird Al's food album of the Jedi Apprentice?
Yes. Yes, eat it, is what Jude Watson is telling us.
That's the name of this chapter.
Alright, so moving on.
So Qui-Gon, so Obi-Wan thought he snuck out so Qui-Gon couldn't see him, and Qui-Gon, of course, saw him, and he is stung by the fact that Obi-Wan has broken his trust. Obi-Wan has not done this before to him, and we all know that Qui-Gon, is he's had some bad luck with Padawans in the past, and like this betrayal is hurting him. He knows why Obi-Wan did it, because, of course, he would have said no, but he lets it slide for now because the most important thing is Tall. And something here, though, that Qui-Gon, this is a thought of his, I have written down here. The youth want peace, but senses great anger in their actions, but Obi-Wan only sees passion. So he is very worried about what's going on here with Obi-Wan. So the youth come back, and they're ready to start phase 2, where they raid the weapons houses. And so while they raid the weapons houses, Sarasi's going to lead the Jedi to Tall. And they sneak into the Melita headquarters, and there's 2 guards posted outside of Tall's jail, and not only are there 2 guards, but her cell is right next to the Melita barracks, so like soldiers are coming in and out, and they just like, well, how the heck do we get through this? And Sarasi goes, hang on, let me handle this. So she goes up through the tunnel, there's a hallway, and she runs down the hallway crying, and she's like, I need to see my father, please let me see my father. My aunt has died, he must know immediately. And these guards are like, whoa, who's your dad? And she goes, Wahooty. And she's, what? Huh? And they're just like, oh, your dad's Wahooty? She's like, yes, I must find him immediately. And they're like, well, I don't think he's here, but like you can go down the other hall and check. So she runs down the hall, and when she's out of sight, she starts firing her laser balls at the wall, and they are convinced that the Dawn are attacking. So it's at this moment that the Jedi leap into action to go rescue Tall. So Qui-Gon goes for Tall while Obi-Wan covers him. So he opens the cell, and Tall is she has a bandage on one eye, and she's described as having green and gold eyes with a golden honey skin, but she's very pale, and Qui-Gon realizes that she has gone blind. Something in her injuries has prevented her from being blind, and that she is very weak. She can't even stand. So Qui-Gon has to like carry her, as more guards are filing in. So there's like 8 or some guards filing in, and Sarasi helps them again by firing more laser balls, which the guards are just like, oh no, we're under attack, and they escape with Tall. So the mission accomplished here. They have rescued Tall.
So with the mission over, they decide they're back at headquarters, and they decide underground, and they decide that when the battle dies down, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are going to take Tall back to Coruscant, and Qui-Gon, he wants to return and help after they go to Coruscant, because he's kind of invested in this, maybe not in the same way Obi-Wan is, but he feels a connection to this, and he doesn't want to just abandon this world. He knows, though, in his heart, he's like, Yoda is probably not going to allow it. And then, he goes out and he sees Neild. He gets up to speak to everyone, and he announces victory, complete victory, total victory, he says, which is very similar.
Mission accomplished.
Interesting. Mission accomplished, exactly. Total victory. This is a little before that. This is still, I think, December 99, so, Jude Watson sees the future. She knows about the Iraq War.
Sure.
It's coming. Anyway, so he's like, we've embarrassed both sides, and mission's accomplished, basically. So then he brings Sarasi on stage for everyone to give him a round of applause, and he brings Obi-Wan up on stage, and Qui-Gon looks at him, and he's like, he fears Obi-Wan is really becoming more of the young than of the Jedi. He's like that, he looks like he belongs up there. At least that's how he feels. So that's very interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
And to backtrack a little bit before I cover the next chapter, I mentioned another food joke in this book. It's on page 86, and this is Tall. I'm afraid I'm a little weak, Tall confessed. Oh, here, Mel, you read this.
Oh, my God.
I'm afraid I'm a little weak, Tall confessed.
I'll carry you. Qui-Gon scooped up Tall in his arms. She felt as light as a child. Can you hang on to my neck? He asked.
He felt her nod as her arms tightened around him. Just get me out of here, she said. I've had better food in a hut cantina. Yuck, yuck, yuck.
You consider that a joke. This is interesting. But anyway.
As this woman is dying of hunger and cannot
she's
even
making
walk.
a joke, like she's trying to make Qui-Gon smile.
Exactly. I find the bigger joke is your Qui-Gon impression. Hey, okay. All right.
Zing.
He worked really hard.
So,
he practices a lot.
All right.
Anyway, so Qui-Gon contacts Yoda, and Yoda here, of course, confirms everything that Qui-Gon speculated that Yoda would say in the last chapter. Get your asses back to Tall. Get your asses back to Coruscant with Tall. She needs healers. And no, you cannot return. You need to see the council first before you guys can come back. So hightail it back here now. And Qui-Gon says, all right. So he has to, they're going to leave the next day because battle is making things difficult for them. So in this moment here, Qui-Gon tells Obi-Wan that they are leaving, and Obi-Wan here is very distressed by this because he knows how volatile the situation is here on the planet, and he calls Qui-Gon out here. This is bottom of page 96. You have broken the rules before, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan argued. Back on Gala, you left me to travel to the hill country when we were instructed to stay at the palace. You break rules when it suits you to do so. And then Qui-Gon took a deep breath trying to control his anger. He would not match Obi-Wan's anger with his own. I break rules because it suits me. I break rules not because it suits me, because sometimes during the missions the rules get in the way, and this is not the case here. So yeah,
this is interesting. Like this is a dispute of kings, but you can see both sides of this issue. On the one hand, Tall will die.
Yes.
If they stay. And Obi-Wan seems very unconcerned about this old woman that he's probably met. He probably knows her to some degree. And he just doesn't care. Like, he's being a little bit of a petulant child. But on the other hand, Qui-Gon, at least to Obi-Wan, seems like he doesn't care at all. I mean, that's not true. We know that he's like, I want to come back, but we need to save Tall first. But he knows Yoda might not allow it. But we all know Qui-Gon from the movie, and we're like, okay, well, he might be able to find a way back, even then, because, Qui-Gon doesn't care if he ever gets on the council. He doesn't care. So.
Right, exactly. And, like, this is that classic that we see a lot in these books where, like, Obi-Wan is not, like, comfortable enough to share his feelings with, like, Qui-Gon. And it's, like, this classic, like, teenage angst, like, oh, like, adults don't understand how I'm feeling. And it's like, you darn kids, we've all been there. We know exactly how you feel. Like, just trust us. But, like, teenagers are like, no. So anyway, there's a roar from the young, and it's Sarasi, and she's claiming it's official. We have asked for a declaration of peace, and it has been ignored. And if it's continued to be ignored by both sides of the elders, we will declare war on them, and they will have no other choice than to surrender, because we have all of their weapons. So they stole the Dan weapons, and then the Melitas, hearing that the Dan weapons were stolen, were fearing that their own weapons were going to be stolen, so they destroyed their own weapons cache. The elders are complete imbeciles, but but this chapter ends with Sarasi turning to Obi-Wan. This is the last push we must do to change the history of Melita Dan. We need your help more than ever.
So, Obi-Wan's pissed that, Qui-Gon's cramping his style, keeping him away from his girl, and Qui-Gon goes to sleep. He's like, in the morning we're leaving. He goes to sleep next to Tall, and Obi-Wan, he goes to say goodbye to Neild and Sarasi, and Sarasi, like, mocks, like, oh, you're just following your Jedi boss, your Jedi boss, and so...
Boss master.
And boss master, all this stuff. And she basically is like, I don't respect your decision. You're like, I need to follow my master, and she's just like, I don't respect your decision. Like, if what your master's saying is wrong, then you shouldn't do it. Like, that's what I did with the elders, and she doesn't know that Qui-Gon's not like the elders. She thinks that Qui-Gon's the same thing. Because she just, don't trust anyone over 30, man. But then, he's just like, I'm sorry, if there's any way I could help, before I leave, I would love to. And Neild is like, oh man, like, I heard you flew in. You know how to fly a fighter? Do you have you have some fighter that you could fly? And remember, they left the fighter in the canyon, when they first flew in at the beginning of the book, and Obi-Wan's like, oh, I do, actually. I can do that for you. And Neild needs to take out this particle shield, and in order to do that, they have to take out these 4 towers, 2 of them in Don territory and 2 of them in, what's the other one?
Melita.
Melita territory, sorry, guys. But anyway, so... they
get it together, Tim.
I know, it's embarrassing. I really, you guys should just take over the show. But they're going to leave early the next morning before Obi-Wan's set to leave with Qui-Gon. And he's conflicted. He's like, if I do this, I am really betraying my master, because this is a potentially dangerous mission. This is our only mode of transport off this planet, and if this ship gets shot down, Jedi Knight Tall is done. She's probably going to die. So this is a very serious betrayal of Qui-Gon, to not tell him about this, not to ask him about this, just because he assumes that he'll say no. Very big betrayal. So he agrees. So
yes. And now we come to Chapter 15, Obi-Wan runs with the wrong crowd. And of course, they take the ship, and I'm really going to paraphrase this chapter. They take the ship. They blow the particle shield to hell. There's a big chase scene where there's these other little ships called floaters. These are small ships that can't reach the altitude or the speed of Obi-Wan's starfighter, and he is just dodging and weaving floaters all over the place, flushing them down the toilet. And so they blow out the particle shield, and Neild is just like, so they're like, yay, we did it, we're all celebrating, and it's like, all right, well, let's get this thing home so I can get out of here. But Neild's like, no, see those halls of evidence down there? Let's blow those all to hell just while we're up here. And like Sarasi's like, whoa, dude, scale it back. There could be people in there, and like we said, no casualties,
and nobody else cares about these halls of evidence.
Yeah, it's just like you're
He's
so
obsessed
pissed that you're
with the halls of evidence. We
He
can
really
talk
is,
about
and,
what
like-
monuments we're going to keep up when the war is over, my guy. Like, this is not the most important thing.
yeah.
That'd be like if
you
we're
can
talking
tell,
about, like, oh, we got to deal with the Confederate flag in 1864. How about we win the war first?
yes.
Oh my god.
He's just pissed because his swimming hole's been ruined by this hall of evidence.
And, well, I mean, both of his parents are, like, in there or whatever, so
He's obviously
clearly
just
very,
sad about
like,
his family and all that
emotionally
stuff. Like,
affected.
that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Because he's a little baby deep inside.
You little
Yeah.
boy, 13 years
But
old.
he has to pretend to be a big man for the people smaller than him.
So anyway, this is actually a quote from Neild when they're talking about, like, the sooner those halls of hate are blown up, the sooner everybody on this planet can breathe again. I despise everything they stand for. This guy, he complains more than Kylo Ren does.
He's very Kilo-esque. I agree.
He is very Kilo-esque.
Yeah.
So anyway, Sarasi and Obi-Wan are like, no, dude, we're not doing that. So they go back to the tunnels, and Obi-Wan had a good time.
Sure. Well, remember, they fly over the fields, and all these children from the outskirts and from...
Right,
The-
they come, like...
They're
flooding
rushing
in.
seems like
towards the
the-
city.
That seems like the most Spielberg-esque moment, like this big
It's very
overhead
Empire of the
shot.
Sun type moment.
Yeah, these children running, like...
So, meanwhile, during this whole thing, Qui-Gon knew that Obi-Wan snuck out. He didn't know what he was doing, but he was like, oh, he wants to have one last hurrah with his new friends, whatever. But little did Obi-Wan know that Qui-Gon was planning something else, and he had sent a message to leaders from the Melita and the Don, including Wahudi, the Melita leader from the beginning of the book, to discuss, to kind of reopen peace talks and meet early in the morning the next day. And when he gets there, they're like very dismissive of the idea initially. And during this time, and he reminds them, like, you are cornered by the young here. They've really got you over a barrel because, like, you're not armed, all that stuff that we talked about. Like, with all the weapons, they've been really defanged. And so then the tower attacks start happening. This is happening concurrently with the previous chapter. And at first it's just the two Dawn outposts are destroyed, and of course the Melita are like, this is Dawn treachery, but then the Melita ones are destroyed, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe there's something to this. And so on page 122, Qui-Gon finally kind of seemingly anyway, convinces them, because he actually tries to reach out for Obi-Wan, because he worries that he might be involved in this attack, and he only feels a void. He feels a void where Obi-Wan normally is in the Force. But on page 122, he says, "These are your children," Qui-Gon cried out. He had lost his patience in the face of the cruel obstinacy of both sides. He controlled his voice and went on, "I, for one, will not kill children. Why are you willing to do so? He turned to Wahudi. What about Sarasi? Are you willing to march into battle against your own daughter? Wahudi paled. He clenched his fist, uncurled. My grandson Rika is underground, Guani said. I have not seen my Delia in 2 years, a woman Melita said quietly. Other Don and Melita looked uncertain. There was a long pause. All right, Wahudi said at last. If you will be our emissary, we will open talks with the young. So, at first they were trying to offer this weird thing where, like, Qui-Gon, you will combine us together and you will lead us into battle against the young. And he's like, I'm not killing kids. So, ultimately, like, what are you talking about? So they say they want to open up peace talks with the young. And from there...
From there, Qui-Gon goes back to the tunnels and he strikes up an argument with Sarasi and Neild. He's urging them to go to these peace talks, and Neild is refusing because he believes it's going to be a trap for them. And Qui-Gon is annoyed that he's like, Neild, you've won. Take your victory. And he's just refusing to do it. So at this moment, he decides to pull Obi-Wan aside. And there's what I think is a pretty deep argument here that ensues between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. I want to read this from page 126 to the middle of 128. You can read the Qui-Gon, and I will read the Obi-Wan.
This is our relationship. I'm Qui-Gon,
yes,
you're Obi-Wan.
And start at... he did not know what to say. It's like the second paragraph on the page.
All right. He did not know what to say. His emotions swamped him. Qui-Gon recalled his temple training with an effort. He would admonish his Padawan according to Jedi rules. First, he would describe the offense. It was the duty of the Master to do so without judgment. Grateful for a guide, Qui-Gon took a deep breath. You were instructed not to take sides.
Yes, Obi-Wan responded calmly. It was the duty of the Padawan to agree to his fault without argument.
You were instructed to be available to leave at any time, he said.
Yes, Obi-Wan replied.
You were instructed that Tal's health was your first concern, yet you endangered that health by taking our only form of transport on a dangerous mission.
Yes, Obi-Wan agreed.
Qui-Gon swallowed painfully. By doing all this, you not only put Tal at risk, but the peace process on Melita Dawn as well.
Obi-Wan hesitated for the first time. I aided in the peace process.
That is your interpretation, Qui-Gon interrupted. It was not your instruction. Your master and Jedi Master Yoda had decided that the Jedi intervention at this stage could only prejudice either the Melita or Dawn, thereby sabotaging the peace process. You were told this. Is that true, Obi-Wan?
Yes, Obi-Wan admitted. It's true.
Qui-Gon paused. He gathered himself to deliver the Jedi wisdom of the Master and Padawan relationship. How the rules had evolved over thousands of years. How the Padawan's pledge of obedience had nothing to do with power, but everything to do with the gaining of wisdom and the humility of service. How he was not here to punish Obi-Wan, or even to teach him, but to aid Obi-Wan's own journey and enlightenment until the day he grew to become a Jedi Knight.
I don't care, Obi-Wan said, breaking his thoughts.
You don't care about what? Qui-Gon asked, startled. Usually a Padawan was silent after his admission, waiting for the Master to decide on their next step.
I don't care that I broke the rules, Obi-Wan said. It was right to break them.
Qui-Gon took a breath. And was it right to break my trust?
Obi-Wan nodded. I'm sorry, but I had to. But yes.
Qui-Gon felt Obi-Wan's words enter him like a blade. He saw in a flash that since he had taken Obi-Wan as his apprentice, he had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the betrayal, the strike. He had hardened his heart, preparing himself for it. And yet he was not prepared at all.
Too good.
Oh, man. That is a dispute of kings right there. Is that going to be our first t-shirt? Dispute of Kings?
There we go.
That could be it.
I'm trying to make that happen.
What is that?
So.
Yeah, what is that website? T
Public,
NV or whatever.
I think is
Yes,
the one.
T Public.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll look
Yeah,
into
well,
it. We need at least 10 listeners before I...
so we can sell one shirt. So anyway, after this happens, a kid comes roaring into the tunnels and announced that the peace talks have failed. The elders have attacked. And this is where shit hits the fan. The elders are scumbags, but they're just doing what they usually do: meet things with hatred is bred into their bones. So this isn't surprising.
Yeah, and in the confusion of the attack, Obi-Wan sneaks off with Neild and Sarasi, and Qui-Gon takes Tal. He hopes to meet up with Obi-Wan at the Starfighter. He sees him sneak off, and he's like, whatever, I hope that he comes to his senses and meets me back at the Starfighter. And Neild and Sarasi, they ask Obi-Wan to use the fighter again to take down the three. There's three. The Elders have only three Starfighters in the air, so they're like, we can take them down, like, if we have access to your Starfighter. And so they ask him to use it again, and Obi-Wan's like, you told me you wouldn't ask me to do this again, but then he's like, you know what? I hope that Obi-Wan's not there. I agree. I'll agree to it. And he goes to get the Starfighter.
Which, like, this was such a classic, like, teenager moment of, like, beginning to realize, like, if you can really trust your friends or not.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, like, oh, yeah, we just need to borrow your car once.
Yeah.
Wait, we need to borrow your car again.
Yeah, I wrote down that Obi-Wan's friends peer pressure him into borrowing his ship again.
Or to him being the designated driver again. Like,
yeah,
it's just like, okay, guys, like, we all got drunk last weekend. Why don't we do something else this weekend? But it's just very, like, so I don't have to be stuck with this.
Again.
But, yeah, it's, Obi-Wan is struggling, guys. He's 13 years old.
Yes.
But the young are so cool.
I know.
Such a cool gain of youths.
Yeah.
They should be the youth.
So
the youth would have been a better name.
Yeah.
I'm putting that out there. The youth.
The youth.
So Obi-Wan is running to the starship, hoping he can get there before Qui-Gon so he can take the ship, no questions asked. Of course he gets there, and Qui-Gon is already there. The ship's about to take off. And in this moment I wrote down that father and son have an argument over the car keys here. And so it's at this moment that they have a standoff. And Qui-Gon is putting his foot down, and he says, "No, you are getting on the ship. We are leaving now." And it's at this moment Qui-Gon was just as prepared. Yet Obi-Wan knew Qui-Gon was just as prepared to fight. The Force swirled around him, but it was a disturbed Force, neither dark nor light. He tried to tap into it. He could not. It was like trying to squeeze a handful of fine sand as it streamed through the cracks in his fingers. He had no choice. The world turned around him. The world around him was dying, and he had to save it. He had to fight Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan went for his lightsaber. Qui-Gon moved only a fraction of an instant later. Because of his quickness, he activated his lightsaber at the same time as Obi-Wan's. Qui-Gon's green beam shot up, glowing in the gray light. Obi-Wan felt his own lightsaber pulse in his hands. Qui-Gon kept his eyes on Obi-Wan. Here was the moment. He only had to step forward and challenge his master. He only had to move a muscle for it to be taken as an offensive move. And then the battle would begin. Obi-Wan met Qui-Gon's gaze and saw the same anguish he felt. He felt something within him crack, and resolve slowly drained away. He could not do this. Simultaneously, they both lowered their weapons, their lightsabers deactivated with a faint buzzing sound. For a moment, all Obi-Wan heard was the lonesome wind howling around the cannon. "You must choose, Obi-Wan," Qui-Gon told him quietly. "You can go with me, or you can stay. Know that if you stay, you are no longer a Jedi." No longer a Jedi? Was he prepared to take that step? Is this what it had come to? The moment spun out and became timeless to Obi-Wan. Time meant nothing. The confrontation with the man he had pledged to study under, to learn from, defend and support, suddenly felt unreal. How did it get here? What was he doing? But through the confusion, he saw Sarassi's fierce, glowing eyes, heard Neil's fervent words. Fervent words. He smelled the smoke of battle and heard desperate cries. He saw barricaded streets and the elders too blind with hatred for no one to notice that they were killing their planet piece by bloody piece. He saw them killing their own children. He could tell Qui-Gon about the battle he had seen. He could try, but he had tried before. Qui-Gon was right. He must make a choice. Obi-Wan grasped the rock of his conviction and felt his confusion drop away. Here on Melita Dan, he had met a reality that was stronger than anything he had known. I have found something here more important than the Jedi Code, Obi-Wan said slowly. Something not only worth fighting for, but dying for. Obi-Wan handed his lightsaber to Qui-Gon. You may go, Qui-Gon Jinn, but I will stay. It was as if Qui-Gon was hit in the face, for he flinched. He stared down at Obi-Wan's lightsaber in hand, not speaking. A great struggle seemed to go on within the Jedi Knight's powerful body. Obi-Wan had hurt him. He longed to take back the words that he could not, but they had been said. He had meant them. Qui-Gon did not look at him. He did not say a word. He turned and strode up the ramp onto the starfighter. Obi-Wan stood back as the engines powered up. The starfighter rose cleanly from the cannon and shot up into the upper atmosphere. He stood watching until it was out of sight, and then Obi-Wan turned his back. He hurried down the path to Zahava and his new life. Sarassi and Neild were waiting.
This is... Alright, so that's big. That is big. Huge cliffhanger.
Yeah, that was a very dramatic ending.
It's the first one of these books that really ends on a cliffhanger. Like, the first one, he's still not his apprentice and stuff, but, like, this is a very dramatic cliffhanger. So, moving into kind of final thoughts, I'm very excited about the next book, The Uncertain Path.
Right.
This is a very dramatic book. Lots of big things happen. I like all the developments in the book. But you kind of hit a point earlier. You've talked kind of throughout this conversation about the that this book, I actually don't think this book is as strong as the previous book.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it was... I feel like the writing style kind of gets in the way of a lot of Star Wars books, and, like, this one especially. I feel like there were just some moments where it was just, like, written oddly.
Well, I think the format of these books...
Not that, like, really, like, detracts from, like, the overall quality of it, but, I don't know. It was just very weird in some spots.
Yeah, I think the format of these books, obviously, is, pretty limited page count, somewhere between 120 and 150
Right.
pages. And there's a lot of story here, a lot of moving parts, and just a lot of stuff has to get explained very quickly, and and that's where you get those kind of exposition dump chapters that you were tasked with summarizing. And so, I'm not saying... I still think this is a very... very good and very compelling entry in the series. I'm very excited for what's going to happen. The character work is pretty strong. Like, again, the conflicts between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon has been building to this at a certain point. It's been building throughout the books, and it's been kind of deftly handled. This just, obviously, they needed to get them to this point at the end of this book. I think the previous book is a more well-rounded story in a singular way, and to some degree, maybe this is just that maybe once we read the next book, it'll be like, this is the best part of the series, like these two books together.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's...
we only have... This is only half of the story.
Yeah, so I still think it's very good. I'm going to give it probably a pretty high midichlorian count,
Okay.
But I'd like to hear, what are your final thoughts, Mel, since you're the guest?
I liked it a lot. I'll, like, extrapolate on like what I said earlier, but like I felt like the first chapter there was a lot of like copy pasting as far as like just explaining, you know, who these characters were. It felt very similar to like the previous book, like almost word for word. But I think that's because like I just read them so closely together. And then like towards the end, like this scene where Qui-Gon's doing the negotiations with like both the sides of the planet, there was a lot of like, oh, the Melita are dirty, rotten pig stealers, said a Dan person. Then a Melita person replied, well, the Dan steal pigs and are also dirty. You know what I mean? Like, it was very, like, back and forth, very kind of, like, repetitive. Yeah, but that being said, I think, like, this story, it's a very ambitious story, that it is kind of, like, unfortunate that it has to be, like, a part of, like, a bigger thing. Like, I feel like this would be a cool opportunity to, like, go into how, like, the Melita and Dan are different. Like, I get that it's, like, they're supposed to be the same, like, that there's not really a difference between them, but I do kind of hate that Star Wars trope where it's like, here's this planet, and there's one city on it, and everybody's exactly alike.
Well, I think even comparing this to the previous book, I thought the difference between the Hill people and the regular Galatians was way more
like,
pronounced,
cool.
and like the cultures were different, and there was an implication that they, you know, looked different too, had darker skin or whatever. So I thought there was a lot. I thought that was a more nuanced, that was a more fully developed world. Part of that is because it was kind of, I think, already set up in previous books a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's...
yeah, but then, like, going from that to, like, this, where it's like, yep, we're all the same here, and there's one city.
Yeah.
Classic.
Well, what's your midichlorian count?
I'd probably give it, like, a 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think 7...
Like 75%.
7 is probably where I'm at, too. And did we officially decide on that? Is that like Obi-Wan? Have we decided?
I thought Obi-Wan was higher. Who is 7? Well, okay, Yoda's 10. So if we go backwards from Yoda, so it's like, I would assume...
Wouldn't 9 be Luke?
Like, Luke, and
then 8 is,
like...
I think we had Qui-Gon at 8.
Okay, so then it is an Obi-Wan.
And then Obi-Wan at 7. I think that's how it was. I don't remember, but...
Yeah. That's fitting for this.
Yeah.
And I think 7, like, 7's about right, because I still think this is... I think I gave the first book a 7. And I think this
did too.
Is better than that, but not by a lot.
For sure.
I think I gave the first book a 7, and I think this is better than that. So, but I just really like the characters, obviously from the movies, but I like the way they're written in these books. So, even though I think some of the plotting of this is a little muddled and some of the world building is not as strong, I hope we get more of that. I think we get more of that, hopefully, in the next book, the sixth book.
In the next book. Yes.
I'm
speculating in the next book that we get Sarasi and her brother back together. We get the Wehudi-Sarasi confrontation. Who knows what'll happen else? A kiss, maybe a romance.
Yeah, I need there to be some tension in this book. I want
some
and
romance.
We're going back to the
rage
temple
and hormones.
too, right?
No, that's the next.
The temple. It looks like we're getting in book 7. So.
Okay. Oh, actually, no, because Qui-Gon will be at the temple, so maybe they'll do like a back and forth parallel story.
Well, we'll see. We will see next
week.
Week. Number 6, The Uncertain Path.
Yeah.
So we all gave it 7 midichlorians? Is that?
7.
All right.
Hand-holding club.
Yes, that's a classic Doughboys reference. The greatest podcast there is.
I agree.
So,
this book made me think of something, though. This has this, of course, this classic old people, young people disagreeing, and what this had made a thought dawn on me that is, in our time, we may experience Star Wars that is being created by people younger than us.
Obviously.
And that really started to, like, worry me
We
about,
may
like,
experience that. We will. It's
We
owned
will
by a giant
experience
corporation
that.
that's going to keep it alive as long as they exist.
Yeah, forever.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
we'll see.
Eternally.
We can talk. Maybe we can make that the subject for next week's episode. We need to wrap
Okay.
There we
it up.
go.
I have class in like
Gotta
40
catch
minutes.
The bus.
So, moving into our last segments, we don't have a letter this week, but remember, you can email us at padawanlibrary@gmail.com. You can send us a message on. You can comment on our Facebook page, Padawan Library, tweet at us, etc., etc. You know the ways. So, also we're on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Review us 5 stars only, please. Thank you.
Subscribe.
We don't have a Wikipedia entry, but this week I'm bringing back an earlier segment, Weird Yoda Syntax.
Begun. The Clone War has.
When Qui-Gon talks, this is on page 94, 95, Qui-Gon talks to Yoda, and he says, and there's just a hilarious, lots of Yoda syntax here. We could bring Tal back and then return, Qui-Gon pointed out. Yoda paused. Before the Jedi Council, you must go, he said finally. Make this decision alone. I cannot. Cared for. Tal must be. Then decide we will, if help we must give. That until then, taking sides the Jedi must not do. Jeopardize peace it would. Avoid you must, angering one side or another. Too many clauses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like anytime Yoda once Yoda gets past like the third sentence in any situation, I just get uncomfortable.
Yeah, like
And it's
Yoda
just,
should
there's
never talk
too
that
many,
long.
in the same sentence, there's too many
Yeah.
reversals. Jude's been pretty good about this. I love Jude. This is the first one of her books that I've been slightly lukewarm on, so I don't want to,
Right.
talk too much shit. But that's a funny bit. I apologize for my terrible Yoda. Anyway,
It's fine. It's
we,
better than my Qui-Gon.
Perfect.
we do have to wrap things up here. Next week, we will be discussing Jedi Apprentice number 6, The Uncertain Path. I hope everyone joins us. Thank you, Mel, for
Yay,
joining us. You will be
anytime.
joining us again next week to finish this story off.
Yes,
Because
of course.
we need to know your thoughts on the conclusion. So,
You can't read a female character either. So,
we couldn't do that. But anyway,
You're very
thank you
limited
very much for
before.
your contributions to the show.
Anytime.
Anyway, Levi, anything last words?
We get those views up. We need to get those views up on the
Just hit
YouTube.
refresh
Check out
a
the
bunch of
YouTube.
times.
Check out all the social media. Send us mail, please. We'd like to bring that
Read
mail
the
segment
book.
back, but we don't want it to just be our friends. So anyway,
Just
see you
read
guys
the book.
next week. Read the next book.
Have fun at class, Tim.
The library
Li-
is closed.
May the
Library's
force be
closed.
with you.
The library's closed, guys! Alright.
Padawan Library is hosted and produced by Tim May and Levi Peretic. It is edited by Tim May. Our theme song is by the Astral Project. Our artwork is by Freddie Funbuns. Padawan Library is copyright 2019 by Tim May and Levi Peretic. All rights reserved.